former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Welcome to the Rich Giardino Show. I'm Rich Giardino. You're listening to the podcast where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. I have a very interesting guest who's a frontline detective who was shot 6 times on November 2nd of 2010. Mario Oliveira from the Somerville Police is a retired detective. He's lucky to survive a tragic shooting, but he turned it around. And like many of our other guests, he's made a mission in life to see that others aren't put in the same position that he and thousands of police officers across this country are in. So I want to welcome you, Detective Oliveira. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's interesting how I found Mario. I was a summer police officer in Yarmouth, Massachusetts on the Cape in 1983, my last summer in law school. And one of my supervising field training officers was Frank Frederickson, who later on became the chief of police out there. I reached out to Frank, and he had retired also. And we got talking about the summer police, because so many of us started there and ended up doing different things. And he said, the guy I should talk to is Detective Oliveira, who's got a story to tell. So tell us, how did you get into policing, and how long were you on the job before this incident happened?
Yeah, so how my entrance into the law enforcement world was due in part to my younger brother, who was also a Somerville police officer and a police detective as well. He joined the force in 1996, I think, and I got on in 1998, a couple of years after he did.
And then fast forward, you went through the ranks as a patrolman, and then do you go right from patrol to detectives, or did you have some transition position?
No, I was a patrolman for the first 5 years, and then I ended up working Vice for a year, undercover, and worked a pretty amazing case that catapulted me into detectives, pretty much.
And then once you're in the detectives, you were assigned to a joint task force with the feds, the state, and local police. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was a local detective for many years, and then after seizing a lot of illegal firearms off our streets, the ATF came knocking and wanted me on their task force, and that's how I joined the federal task force.
That's an honor to serve, and we appreciate it. So tell us what happened on the November 2nd, 2010, and that was in the early evening hours, right?
Yeah, the incident happened at 6:34 p.m. on November 2nd, 2010. To give you the Reader's Digest version of what happened, I had been investigating an individual who had purchased 10 guns up in New Hampshire. The individual was 21 years old, 21-year-old male. Personally, and I'm sure you do too, do you know any 21-year-olds that buy 10 guns in a week? I don't.
Not often.
So, yeah, it was very suspicious, to say the least. And subsequent investigation led me to believe that this guy was running guns from New Hampshire down to Mass. I bring this kid in for an interview and interrogation. Shortly thereafter, he kind of gave it all up. He admitted on tape that he was buying guns for gangbangers in Boston. He would go up to he found a loophole in the gun laws in New Hampshire. And he was able to go to New Hampshire, buy guns, cash money, his own money. He would obliterate the serial numbers and then go to meet these guys in Boston, and he'd sell them on the street for $1,800. So the kid made $14,000 his first week in operation.
So people know Somerville. Are you guys like north of Boston a little bit?
We are just north of Boston. We border Boston, the city of Boston. So we're right on the cusp. So a lot of Boston traffic, and a lot of the shitheads from Boston frequent our community as well, and vice versa.
And the kid who would be going up to New Hampshire, what's he come down I-95, or do they come across like more like east of where you guys
He,
are?
I don't know what route
Mhm.
what particular route he took, but he was from my city, from the city of Somerville, and he got residency up in New Hampshire by paying some kid up there some money to put his name on his lease. And with that copy of that fictitious lease, he went to the RMV up there and got a driver's license. And that's all you need up in New Hampshire is a driver's license. Show that you're a resident in the live free or die state of New Hampshire. You can buy guns.
So then fast forward, he doesn't work out. At first he's cooperating, then what happens? Goes sideways.
Well, I confront him about the firearms transactions that he bought. He confesses to who he sold them all to. Um, I locate two more firearms in his trunk of his car that night, with a consent form from him. And he's looking at 40 plus years in federal prison based upon the crimes that he admitted to. So, I have a big heart. That's kind of one of my biggest weaknesses. And I'm feeling bad for the kid. And I offered him an olive branch. I offered him, instead of going to jail, if he would cooperate with the police and be a cooperating source. He initially agreed, called the U.S. Attorney's Office, got them on board. They gave their blessing, and I gave the kid a hug. I told him to go home and meet me the next day so we can do what we call a reverse. I was going to give him guns, ATF guns, with no firing pin, that he could then sell to these gangbangers at a predetermined location that I would select. And then we would be there. And when the deal went down, we would swoop in and arrest everybody to make it look pretty and put the kid back on the street again and just repeat this process.
So it's funny because you say the compassionate. My dad was a pediatrician, and so I was always compassionate as a judge and a DA. I always felt sorry for kids who didn't have the same upbringing that you and I did. But I think the hug is an Italian thing because you always want to try to get them to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, listen, we're trying to help you, kid." So fast forward. So then what happens?
So we have this reverse set up for the following day. He never shows up. He never showed up. Instead, he actually went on social media taunting me in the ATF. And that prompted me to go get federal warrants for his arrest. I did make contact with him several days later on the phone. I made him aware that I had warrants for him, and I was going to find him. He was going to go to federal prison. He kind of disappeared for the following 2 or 3 weeks. I had gone by his house with my partner several times, morning, noon, night, overnights, just to see if he was home. He was never around. And then November 2nd came, and I remember I was doing a detail that morning, and I was going to work a PM shift, 4 to midnight. And I was in the office writing up a search warrant on another matter, another case I was working. And my ATF partner came in and suggested that we go by his house to take a ride, thinking I would never see him. And he hadn't been home in 3 weeks. Why would he be home tonight? Right? That's what I was thinking. I grabbed my bag, grabbed the warrant, hopped in my partner's car, drove up to his house, and sure as shit, he's home.
So it's like we don't let our guard down, but we know this kid, so we're thinking 21-year-old. You already dealt with him face to face. He's gonna come along. He's gonna be sarcastic, but he's gonna come along. I mean,
Right.
that's it. I mean, there really is no routine stop or arrest, but there's some that make us think that, well, even though the kid's dealing guns, he's a guy you've talked to and So what happens next?
So we devise a last minute plan. Again, keep in mind it's election night in the city. There's a lot of
Oh,
police officers doing polling assignments at polling places where people can vote. And he lives right in the middle of the city, just up the street from City Hall. So the city's bustling. It's supper time, 6:30 at night. Everybody's coming home from work or after eating dinner and going to the polling places before they close to get their last minute votes in. So we're cognizant of that. and we're coming up with a plan that's going to be safe for the citizens of our community, and making it affecting a safe arrest of this kid and putting him in custody, and also for the officers involved. So I'm across the street in the bushes. There's a little parking lot right across the street from his house, and I'm across the street. I'm in plain clothes. I have my badge on a lanyard around my neck, clearly displayed. My gun's in my hand. My ATF partner's in his unmarked car up the street. He's going to come up the one-way street with no headlights and do what we call bumper locking. He was going to come up and put his bumper on his car and not allow him to get away. My lieutenant and my sergeant were going to come up on foot behind me to be my backup on foot. And I figured the minute he turned his back to me to open his car door, I'm going to come up from behind, knock him to the ground, cuff him and stuff him. It's all over, because it would be a surprise hit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out. It didn't work out that way. He made it to his car before I could get to him. He shut the door, turns the ignition. I'm still across the street, still on the sidewalk. So now I rush across the street. I open his driver's door. I grab him by the throat, have my gun to his head, and I pin his head back to the headrest of his driver's seat. And at that time, my partner had hit his car. So I felt the jolt, when I opened his car door. We hit the car simultaneously. So I got him by the neck, and I'm pinned him to the back of his seat, or the headrest of his seat, and I have my gun to his forehead. And I'm giving him commands to get out of the car, get out of the fucking car, you're under arrest. He grabs me by my wrist. He's trying to get me off of his throat. And he's yelling and screaming at me to shoot him. He's yelling, fucking shoot me, fucking shoot me. And I don't see a gun. It's dark up. And I'm halfway in the car. And at that point, when he's yelling at me to shoot him, I looked at my gun, and the slide on my gun was halfway back. And I said, exactly. I said, shit. If my gun goes off and this kid's unarmed, he ain't going to fucking jail. I'm going to jail. I'm the one that's going to fucking prison. So I remember I eased off the gun, still holding on to his throat. And right at that second, my sergeant was running up the sidewalk with his gun in the air, and he's screaming my name, Mario, Mario, Mario. And I looked over the roof of the car to see what he wanted. And I looked back down on the car. I just saw flashes. Pop, 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 pop.
You have a vest on?
I had no vest. I just had a t-shirt and a windbreaker. A Nike windbreaker. I took 6 rounds to the chest and stomach at point blank range.
Wow. What kind of handgun did he have?
A 40 caliber gun. Handgun.
So what happens next?
I fall out of the car. I never lost consciousness. Everything was kind of like, you ever get sucker punched?
Yeah, and you're like confused.
You're a little dazed a little bit, but you know what's going on around you. I heard immediate gunfire, pop, 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 pop. And I'm trying to get my bearings, and I'm holding on with my left arm. I'm holding myself up because I'm sitting on my ass, and I'm trying to, my brain is trying to work properly, and I'm telling myself, lift your leg over the other one and crawl out of there, because there's shots fired. Get the fuck out of there. I couldn't move though, Rich. My legs felt like I was paralyzed. Yeah. And I remember, struggling mentally to tell my body to do something. But I just felt like I was just dead weight. And right at that moment, I felt someone grab me by the collar of my shirt and my windbreaker. And I remember looking up, and it was my partner, Brian Higgins, who had exited his vehicle, came to get me. He lifted me up off the ground and was firing into the car. Now, keep in mind, at the same time, this is all in slow motion for me. Everything's in slow motion.
Mario, when you get shot, do you feel it, or is your body just in shock and you don't know what the hell's going on?
To be honest with you,
it's a silly. I guess it's a silly question, but
no, it's not. It's a good question. It's a question I get often. It was it didn't hurt. I just went numb. But what I did feel, the best way I can describe it, it was that I had the chills, like when you have the flu, and
Mhm.
people were putting out lit cigarettes on me. So I felt burning sensations where all the bullets had entered. That's the best way I can describe it. But my body was just numb and I was hyperventilating. I was scared shitless, to be honest with you,
Mhm.
you know. And so now Brian's shooting into the car. I saw every single shell casing that he shot, every shot, flying in the air. And I remember my eyes following each shell casing as they ejected from his gun. And then I felt being dragged. Brian dragged me across the street diagonally and left me under a parked car. And at that point, I'm lying on my side. I could feel my heart rate in my throat, and I'm hyperventilating. I'm breathing heavy, and I was in disbelief of what the hell just happened. I couldn't believe what the hell just transpired. And all the while, I can hear gunfire, pop, rapid fire, pop, 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 pop. I knew it was my guys, and it sounded like a machine gun, but we all know in law enforcement that's the sound you hear when you have multiple shooters at the same time, right? They're all firing rounds at the same
One
time,
guy shoots and everybody shoots. I
right?
mean, reaction.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm on my side. I'm watching the kid in the car ducking over the under the steering wheel, popping his head up, and shots are being fired by my guys. Joe McCain, my lieutenant, was running up the front up the street, shooting through the front windshield at him. The sergeant was on the sidewalk shooting through the passenger window at him, where I was once sitting outside the door, and Brian Higgins was shooting through the back windshield into the car. So it's essentially crossfire. These
Yeah.
three guys were all shooting at each other and they swear on the Bible they never saw each other.
Just focused on him. So
Yeah.
how many shots did he take ultimately? And
I
because
believe he took 14 shots and he died in the car.
people don't understand, Mario, that once, like you said, once one guy shoots, everybody starts shooting. It's just a reaction. And it's like if somebody else gun or somebody else, he's got a gun, it's your training is muscle, you just go, but then your mind is saying he's got a gun, and when you hear the shots, you don't know who's shooting. Is it my partner? Is it this guy? And then people open up. From all the stuff that I know, fortunately, I've never been involved in a gunfight, thank God. Um, so then do they take in a mark or a patrol car to the hospital, or do they call an What do they do from there?
So a little bit happened while I was on the ground across the street. Um, I remember just looking up at the sky. It was a clear sky that night. I saw stars up there. And at that time, I was married with a 3-year-old little boy at home. And all I could think of was, my family's at home watching TV, doing what they do every night, and they have no idea I'm about to die. I'm underneath a parked car waiting to die.
Hmm.
And I remember looking up and I was just shaking my head, just praying, waiting. I was waiting for an angel to come down from heaven to come and get me. Because I was about to find out what happens to us when we die at the moment that we perish. And again, I'm hyperventilating. I'm trying to control my breathing, and my mind did something miraculous at that moment. I told myself to calm myself down. So what did I do? I took a deep breath through my nose, exhaled through my mouth, and I started calming myself down. And my brain did something crazy. It shifted. I didn't hear any noise anymore. No more gunfire. Instead, I remembered my senior prom. I remember being a young kid and playing street hockey in the schoolyard where I grew up in East Somerville. I remember my childhood friends, all the good times of my life. it was almost like my mind was preparing myself for peace, for that moment of peace, in leaving this earth. And then everything shifted back to reality where I could hear the kid's mother screaming, "That's my son, you're shooting my son." That's when I learned that his mother saw the cops kill her son. She came out of the house and witnessed this whole shootout, which I'm a father of 3 boys now. No parent should ever see their kid get killed. I don't give a shit what they did. That's just horrific. We're all
Did she
human at the
see the beginning? Did she see him shoot you, or did she just get your
I don't
attention?
know. I don't think she saw him shoot me. I think she came out in the hail of gunfire when she started hearing everything. Um, so at that point now, they kill him. He's no longer a threat. They focused their attention on me, my guys, and they ran to me. The first officer to me was my lieutenant. He said that he sat me up on the rear wheel of the parked car, and he was kind of slapping my face to kind of get my attention. And he told me later, when I got home from the hospital in a month after, that I was ash gray and my eyes were rolling in the back of my head, but I wouldn't shut up. So I remember I grabbed him by his shirt with my good left hand. And I pulled him close to my face and I said, "Don't let me die, Joe. Get me out of here. Put me in the back seat of your car. Throw me in the fucking trunk. Don't wait for an ambulance. I've lost a lot of blood." His blood was gushing out of me. And he said, "Help's on the way. Help's on the way." And it seemed like it was an eternity, but eventually the paramedics showed up. They got me on a gurney. And as they were running me by, I looked over and I saw Joe McCain, my lieutenant, sitting on the sidewalk, crying. He was bawling his eyes out, and I saw his gun on the floor by his feet. And he had his hands in his face and he was crying, like sobbing. I later learned that after he left me and let the other guys attend to my wounds, he called his wife. He walked away from me, called his wife, and said, "Maureen, you're going to watch it on the news. There's been a Somerville cop shot. It's not me. I'm okay. It's Mario. I'm involved in the shooting. But Mario, I just lied to him. I told him he was going to be okay, but he's going to fucking die any second." I just heard his last words.
Hmm.
He's going to fucking die. And he sat on that sidewalk, crying, sobbing like a little baby. Uh, so now as they whisked me by and I saw him, I heard my deputy chief ask one of the paramedics, "How's my guy?" And I heard one of the paramedics say, "I don't think he's going to make the trip." Imagine hearing that. Pretty much he's a dead man. That's what I heard. And most people think that was bad for me. It was good for me because that gave me the will to survive even more. I had superpower strength at that point in my head anyway. I was so determined to survive this thing. I was not going to let anything stop me. So now I'm in the back of the ambulance, and Brian Higgins and Ernie Nadile, who was a senior detective on scene, were both in the ambulance with me, each with their knees on either side of my chest. All right. And they're trying to stop the bleeding. And the paramedic was trying to get an IV in me. And I'm fighting with him. I'm telling him, "Do your fucking job, and I'm going to do mine. You keep me alive, and I'm going to fight to stay alive." And I kept telling him, "I got to get home to my son. He's only 3 years old. I can't die tonight. I can't leave my son on this earth without his father. I got to get home to my son." That was the only concern I had. I'm like, I got to get home to my wife and son. I got to get home to my family. Don't let me fucking die. And the paramedic said, "Oh, you have 2 boys?" I said, "What are you, a fucking asshole? I just told you I have one. He's 3 and his name is Drew." So that asshole's telling me I have two boys and I only have one. So you'll understand why that's important afterwards.
Okay.
I make it to Mass General Hospital, right? I can hear the beeping of, when they put it in reverse and they're backing in. Mass General then had like a U-shaped emergency entrance, big parking lot that's like a U-shape. And as they're backing me in, when the doors opened, all I remember seeing was a tunnel of blue a sea of blue. You ever watch like a football game at the beginning when the quarterback comes out and all the
Yeah.
players on the side and they're all giving high five or low five? That's what it looked like to me. It was a sea of cops on both sides, and as they wheeled me by, I remember everybody tapping me on my leg, telling me that they love me and for me to be strong. And I'll tell you, it was a poignant moment for me because it gave me strength. I was never more proud to be a cop at that moment, to have my brothers and sisters be there for me, cheering me on, and I remember putting up my left arm with my thumb, and I gave them the thumbs up to let them know that I can hear them and I'm still alive. And so as they bring me into the emergency room, it's chaos in there. All I heard was yelling and screaming and just sheer pandemonium. So they bring me into this trauma bay area, and right away, I'm surrounded by doctors and nurses. And so I'm lying proned out flat, and I'm looking up at their faces. So they're on this side of me and this side of me, and they're working on my stomach and my chest. I can't see what the hell they're doing because I'm proned out completely. And of course, those assholes put a fucking neck brace on my neck. So I can't even, you know what I mean? So I can't even lift my head up.
Mhm.
And I'm telling them, I didn't fall. Take this fucking thing off of me. I got shot. And of course, I think they eventually did. And so as I'm looking up at these doctors and nurses, I can hear the panic in their voices. They're yelling, more blood. We got to get blood. We got to do this. We got to do that. Talking like medical terms. And I was so tired from staying alive at that point. My eyes felt really, really heavy. And I remember thinking, if I close my eyes for a couple of seconds and just kind of regroup, I can get through this. And I remember I closed my eyes for like maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And when I opened them back up, all those people were gone. The people that were working on me were all gone. They weren't working on me anymore. I could still hear them in the room. They were nearby. They just weren't working on me. And that startled me for a second. So I remember kind of looking around a little bit in the room. And when I did that, out of the corner of my eye on my left side, I saw a silhouette of a person. It was a nurse that was standing there. And I dipped my head to see better. And I described this nurse as a shorter, stocky lady. She looked like she was 70 years old. She had big round circular glasses, and her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. And this nurse came walking closer to me, and she came right to my gurney, and she got right into my face, and she was massaging my forehead really gently. And she kept saying with a kind voice, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay." And I looked at her and I said, "Please put a blanket on me. I'm cold." I was in shock. I said, "I'm very cold. Put a blanket on me." I never saw a blanket. I never saw her leave my side, but I felt instant warmth when she touched my forehead. And then within seconds, they wheeled me out of that trauma bay area. They were running down the hall. My doctor, Dr. King, he had the front of the bed, the gurney, with like those metal bars. And he
Yeah.
was dragging the bed and he's screaming, "Hold the elevator, floor 3, OR 26, floor 3, OR 26. And we got in the elevator. He's barking orders to his team. He's giving direction, telling one guy, "You fire up the x-ray machine when we get up there. You get me X amount of units of blood. You do this, you do that." The doors open to the elevator, ding ding. They open up, they wheel me into the operating room. I know I'm there because it's much colder up there. Lights are much, much brighter. It's much quieter. And I'm lying there looking up at these bright lights. And all I could think of was like, when are these fucking people gonna put me to sleep? Like, I don't want to hear this shit anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting to stay alive. This is a long time. And right at that moment, out of the corner of my eye, I felt a presence, someone standing there. And when I looked again, it was that same older nurse from downstairs. She once again came over to me to my side, was massaging my forehead, and she kept telling me I was going to be okay. And at that point, I asked her just to let me die. I said, "Just let me die. I'm tired. Tired of fighting to stay alive. Tell my family I love them. Tell my son I love him. And I fought hard to stay alive with him." And she said, "No, no, no, you're not going to die tonight. You're not going to die tonight." And everything went black at that point. So I woke up in the ICU a day and a half later. And I woke up. I was kind of propped up on a hospital bed. I had a feeding tube up my nose into my belly, and my arm was up in a sling. Um, my wife was there and my parents. And when I could talk, I asked them where I was, and they said, "You're at the Mass General." And I said, "I'm alive?" And they said, "Yeah, you died 3 times last night, and they brought you back." When the nurses heard me speak to my family, they went and got Dr. King. He came into the room or into the trauma area where I was in recovery. And I remember he walked up to the foot of my bed. He squeezed my foot really hard and said, "Hey, champ, can you feel this?" And he squeezed my foot. And I said, "Yeah, I'm not paralyzed." He said, "No, you were the luckiest SOB I've ever met in my life. I've never seen anybody get shot up the way that you did and survived." He told me, "You died on me 3 times last night. One of the times I cut your diaphragm and I reached in with my own hand and I massaged your heart back to life." And I was like, "You did what?" And he told me at that point that he was a colonel in the Army on Delta Force and that he's done this maneuver before on the battlefield to many soldiers. And that's how he saved them. And he used his military skills on me that night to save me. And if it were not for him, I'd be dead. I can tell you that with certainty. So, of course, my parents are thanking him. My wife's thanking him. I'm thanking him. And I told him, I said, "Hey, Doc, there was a nurse here that night that helped me. Can you go get her for me? I want to meet her and I want to thank her." And he looked at me and he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, when you guys brought me into the emergency room and you were working on me at first, she was there with us. And then when you ran down the hall, you were pulling my bed, screaming, 'Hold the elevator, floor 3, OR 26. She was with us. She was with us in the elevator, and then she was with us in the operating room." And I told him everything he did. And when I said that to him, he turned white. And he looked at my parents and he did the timeout sign. He goes, "Hold on a minute. How do you know all this stuff?" I said, "I was right on the bed, right next to you. You were pulling my bed." He said, "No, you were dead. You were gone. You had died for over 5 minutes. You were gone. I could have pronounced you dead. And this nurse that you just described, she wasn't on my trauma team. I don't know who the hell you're talking about." So he asked me to describe her again. So I described her physical look: short, stocky lady, 70 years old, big round circular glasses, hair pulled back, a tight bun. My mom collapsed crying at the time. I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together at the moment. So the doctor keeps telling me that there was no such nurse on his team that looked like that. You know, I begged him to go make a valiant effort to find her because I was determined to meet her and thank her. I did about 3 weeks in the hospital and was eventually released home. The day that I got home from the hospital, I found out that my wife was pregnant. 9 months later, on my birthday, my second son was born. That paramedic was right, Rich. I had 2 boys. I just didn't know.
Wow.
So I named my son after my surgeon. He's also his godfather.
It's a great,
And
that's a great,
yeah, in order to honor him for saving my life. And a few days later, my parents came to my house with some soup, and because I was on a liquid diet.
It's an Italian thing, isn't it? The
Yeah.
soup.
So well, I'm Portuguese. I'm not Italian. Close enough.
Oh, he's not good enough for me. The vowel. You
Yeah.
got a vowel, man. That's all. And a Mario.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's it. So my mom had a picture frame to her chest when she came in, and she sat next to me on the couch and gave me a kiss on the forehead and asked me how I was doing. I said, "Mom, what do you have?" And she said, "I brought something to you because I want you to keep this on your wall at home. Promise me you'll keep this on your wall at home." I said, "Of course." She gives me the picture frame. When I flipped it over, I just started crying. I actually peed myself crying. And I said, "Mom, this is my nurse. This is the nurse." The nurse was my grandmother. What I found out at that moment was my brother John, the cop, he had called my mother up to tell her I'd been shot. And he told her that I wasn't going to make it. My mother, when she heard this news, she fell to her knees at her house. She grabbed her rosary beads and wrapped them around her knuckles, and she started praying to her mother to save me and to not let me die. And that's who came to my side at the hospital.
What
Yeah.
it's just so compelling and it's so moving. Um, I want to move into what you did as a result because people don't know there's a difference. What you went through, had you died, your family would have had so many more benefits than you had. So listen, this is the most compelling conversation we've had on our show. There's a Rich Giardino show. We're on YouTube, X, Spotify, Apple, and Rumble. If you get a chance, please like, share, and have your friends listen to this. You will not hear a more compelling story than Mario's story. So, Mario, as a result, you started learning that the benefits. So, well, first of all, how long were you in rehab to get back on your feet and everything?
So I worked hard to try to get back on my feet. Um, finding out that your wife is pregnant with a baby and you have a 3-year-old, like any cop out there, I had a financial plan in mind. I wanted to do the details and work overtime, make as much money as I could to send my kids to college and to give them the best life possible, right? That's what we all do.
Yep.
And that plan got railroaded at no fault of my own. So all I could think of was I got to get back on my feet. So I lied to my doctor. I lied to my wife. I lied to my parents. I lied to myself. I went back to work in 5 months, only to suffer a heart attack and then a stroke. And that's what put me out for good. And what I learned when I had to retire was the mayor of my city was just wanted to give me 72% of my pay because that's what the law is. 72%, and then you're capped at what you can earn. You can't, you can only earn a certain amount of money over and above the 72%. I think it was like
And
15,
it's not a lot of money. You're talking a couple.
15,000.
Yeah.
That's all you can make. So I started really panicking. I fell into a real deep depression and just wished that I had died. Because I'll tell you right now, had I died that night, my wife would have received a one-time federal payment. I think it was like 356,000 at the time, tax-free. The state would have given her a check for 300,000 tax-free. So she would have got almost 700,000 tax-free. She would have received 100% of my pay for the rest of her life, tax-free. Every raise that my department gets, she would have got. I owned a home at the time in the town of Billerica. She wouldn't have to pay property taxes on our home, and my boys would have went to college for nothing for 4 years. So those are all the benefits that you get when you die in the line of duty. But because I survived, my mayor wanted to give me a little bit more than half my pay. So essentially, I was being punished for surviving, financially speaking.
So then you get into the situation where you balance not, like you said, you don't want to demean those who give their lives in this job, but you want to bring up those that, for the grace of God, live, and they lose that difference, and they still got to support their family. So what? So you start a movement in Massachusetts, right? And you co-found Violently Injured Police Officers Organization, VIPO, VIPO,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so tell us annually about how many police officers in Massachusetts or the country fall into that area that they don't lose their lives, but they get permanently disabled as a result of the
I don't
job.
have I don't have exact numbers because the FBI doesn't really do a great job of tracking them. But what I can tell you is that there are thousands of police officers like me out there in the US who have been violently and catastrophically injured and were just put out with some of these folks are out at 66 and 2/3, less than what I was going to get even. And that's just wrong. And of course, like you said, to your point, we should always honor and never forget the fallen and their families as well, because they're dealt a major blow, they're left without their mom, their dad. Parents are left without their son or their daughter for life. So we have to honor the families as well. But in the
So
same
you,
token, those of us that get critically injured and are lucky enough to survive, to your point earlier, we shouldn't be forgotten either, and we shouldn't be left to struggle financially to try to rebuild our lives. And I don't believe that we deserve the same as a fallen officer and their family. No, but at least give us our full pay is what I fought for. And after many visits to my local church and praying to God and talking to him, he gave me the message of do good with your life. I left you here for a reason.
Mm.
Do something good with your life. Do something positive. And that's where I came up with the idea of starting a foundation and fighting for what's right for those of us that fall into my category. And I wrote
while
legislation.
it took a while, but you finally it just got signed into law recently, correct, in
12,
Massachusetts?
12 years of fighting my
Well,
state legislature. It finally got signed into law 2 weeks ago.
congratulations. So tell us what kind of package were you guys able to get accomplished with your
Yeah. So
organization?
So now any officer that's catastrophically injured in the line of duty and can't return to this job, they're going to receive 100% of their base salary at the rank they held at the time of their injury. That's going to be until they reach the age of 65. Tax free. Every raise that their department gets, they get. Even retroactive pay, all tax free. Their medical is paid for or covered by their respective department. And there's no income restrictions on their earnings. If they're able to get back on their feet and they go in the private sector and get a job, they can make $100,000 a year there and collect their full pension at their department.
Congratulations. Let me ask you this. It took 12 years to get in Massachusetts. What about other states? Have they followed the lead? Have you advocated with others across the country, or where are you with
So
that?
yeah, since being shot, I've had the opportunity to speak at many conferences throughout the country, and that's kind of how I've started, sending my message. I've been to 27 different states, speaking at conferences in front of thousands of police officers, tell them my story of survival, but also what they could do to change and effectuate positive change. Um, since my tour, we'll call it a tour of making it across the U.S., I've been able to pass my legislation in 4 different states already: New Hampshire, recently Mass, Oklahoma, and Kentucky. And it's been filed
Congratulations.
already in 9 other states. It's in the process.
Anything in New York? Because I got to look into New York now because
No,
they.
not yet. I'm actually waiting for a gentleman who's a higher up union guy in New York to call me so I can get out there and speak to NYPD and get a lawmaker to adopt my legislation and file it officially.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. You and I'll talk next couple days. I've got a couple people who would back that in a second, and we can mirror what they did in Massachusetts. I got to find out what our benefits are because I know our death benefits, but I don't know the injuries other than, like you said, a percentage of your
Mhm.
pay, like a pension. So let me ask you this: so if people want to know more about your project and your goals, they can go to a website or Facebook, Violently Injured Police Officers Organization, VIPO, correct?
The website is vipo911.org. So VIPO911.org. That's our website. We also have an app, iPhone or Android app. It's called the Vipo 911. You can find it on the App Store, and it's free download, and you'll have access to all of our resources, clinicians, attorneys. You can read about all the stories of all these injured officers that I've helped personally. It's pretty cool. And then we
So
have a Facebook page.
one of the things I want to stress is if you're law enforcement and you're listening to this, or you're a legislator and you're listening to this, reach out to Mario because he will provide this information. If you can't find, again, it's VIPO911.org.
ORG. Org.
.org. they always confuse .com and .org. But
Yeah.
Mario will be willing to help you, help your people get this legislation passed in your state. And again, you can reach out to me. I can give you his contact information with his permission, and you'll have it. And you can reach out to him. Again, I don't think there'll be too many nefarious types listening to our podcast, but I won't give it out on the air, and I will share it with your permission if people do reach out, because
Absolutely.
it's not isolated in Massachusetts. It's how police are treated. Well, you survived. Wait a second, 1 inch this way, 1 inch that way, one other, half a pint of blood, I might not be here. So we don't. It's like our veterans. You know, Sometimes you almost feel that there's some politicians that treat us disposable, and it's not. It's the defund police movement that thinks that every time a police officer gets accused of doing something or a bad video comes out, they forget that there's 650,000 other police officers every day putting their lives on the line for their families and for their own and our own families. So
Yeah.
so what I'd like to do is, I'd like to get you back in the fall and talk about some more states and things. And I will reach out because I'd like to talk to you about. I got a couple legislators. We have a Senate, an assembly, and then the executive branch, all controlled by the Democrats, all controlled by many people who are defund police or make it more difficult every day for us to retain and recruit people. Um, I know I don't know how Massachusetts is, but it's a fight that we fight every day. And in New York, if a police officer is involved in the death of an individual, even if the individual shoots him 6 times, they'd be investigated by our attorney general's office.
Yeah.
If you do a high-speed chase and a fleeing felon who's got a record as long as you and I are tall, and they crash, then we get investigated for their death. Or if they hurt somebody else, it's the police officer's fault.
Yeah.
Anything else as we wrap up that I should know, or that our listeners
Um, I just like to close with, unfortunately, police officers have been vilified by many in local and national politics, unfortunately, and a lot in the media. Not all, some in media outlets, and it's unfortunate because we are the guardians of our communities. Without us, there's nothing but chaos and anarchy, and the only people that lose are the citizenry of these communities. But they're the ones that are voting these folks in. So it's really, use your head when you vote. Really do your due diligence and see what these candidates, what they're really pushing, what their agenda is, because ultimately, it could come all crashing down. And I'm trying to stop it from happening.
I want to thank you for your efforts. I want to say God bless you for being alive today. And I want to tell you, I always tell people, we're the only profession in this country that you wish were dead. You say fry us up like bacon. You throw frozen bottles of water at us. You ambush us, and then you call 911. And you know what? We don't say, "Oh, what's your gender? How do you identify? What's your religion? What's your race? What's your politics?" We say, "What's your emergency?" And we go to the same people who the day before are condemning us and want us dead. And I
Right.
said, that's a proud profession to be in, and something that, it's more difficult and more challenging than day one when you started and when I started. So listen, this was the most fascinating, interesting conversation that we've had in a while. I'd like you to please continue to watch our show. This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, on X, on Spotify, on Rumble, and on Apple. And there's a whole bunch of other platforms that I don't even know the names because I'm not a kid. But I really want to thank Mario for joining us and sharing his story and sharing his mission. And truly, one of the things with most of our guests that's interesting is that God and religion have crossed paths with them when they've been at their worst points, and they try to turn around and do something, make it better for everyone who follows behind them. So I want to thank you, Mario, for what you've done and what you've gone through. And my question is it retroactive? Does your legislation cover people like you
Yes,
who've
it,
been
it,
through it?
it goes back to retroactive 2 years. See, I got this 14 years ago on my own as an individual package. Okay, so what I did was I took the power away from the politicians and made it a law where it's not a matter.
So it's not so
Okay,
so that you don't have to negotiate for your family and your future.
exactly. So that's what I
Thank you
have to do.
very much. And I'm going to reach out to you this week. I'll text because I'd really like to promote it with our local legislators. Okay. So
Yeah,
again,
and
it's WIPO911.org and that
yep.
Facebook too and stuff.
Yeah, so the Facebook is supporters of violently injured police officers. That's the Facebook page. They can ask to join our group. I'll approve them. There's a couple of questions you have to ask. That's how I vet you. And also, before I forget, I wrote a book that was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. It's called Gun Runner, the Mario Oliveira story. That book now is being made a film. So we're in the process of polishing up our script, our screenplay, and we're going to get funding and hopefully be in pre-production by the spring.
Boy,
With filming.
I'll tell you, it's such a compelling story. And you know what? And what's funny is you telling it and it being on film. There's no way. It's so hard to duplicate when you hear you tell it. It's just so emotional, you know. I hope that people will buy your book and hear what happens, what it's like being on the front lines, trying to save other people from losing their kids with gun violence. Nobody
Right.
likes it when somebody nobody likes it when we lose somebody, but there's some evil people that cause their own death by trying to kill police officers. And it's, you know, it's sad for their families, certainly, but it's sad for police who are just doing their job and are targeted because they are police. Thank you very much, Mary. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rich.
Like and subscribe to The Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on The Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.